Donald Trump's health is a clear and present danger to the country and to the world. That's not me saying it. That is the opinion of 36 different doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, Nobel laureates, who all signed a letter that's now a part of the official Congressional Record, saying that over the years, and as they've been watching Donald Trump in the last decade, his behavior, his physical and mental abilities have been so diminished that he is now too dangerous to serve as president. The topic of Donald Trump's health has been a headline for more than a year now, mostly his physical health, disappearing to doctor's visits, coming back with swollen ankles, bruising on his hand, and now hands, plural, that the White House has been trying to cover poorly with some kind of movie makeup, a rash on Donald Trump's neck, falling asleep at least by my count 17 times while on camera at public events as president. But for these doctors, it wasn't just the physical, but the behavioral and mental decline that they say they've seen in the president in public. His erratic behavior, rage, not being able to control his impulses, and what they call late-night manic-like posting on Truth Social, which we've all seen. On top of it, the president, they say, seems frequently disoriented, unable to hold a thread in the sentences he's saying, something called tangential speech, even though MAGA calls it the weave and says that President Trump is a genius for being able to hold these ideas together. These doctors say, actually, that's clinically something else. And as Americans, it seems like we know that. In a recent Washington Post poll, 59% of Americans said they no longer thought that Donald Trump had the mental sharpness to serve as president. 55% said he was no longer physically well enough to be president. And even one of Trump's own press secretaries, Stephanie Grisham, a woman who worked with the president day in, day out during his first term, said online that he is clearly unwell. It's why my guest today is Dr. Henry Abraham. He was one of the lead authors of that open letter of doctors and is sounding as many alarms as he's been able to get his hands on about the president's declining health, specifically because Donald Trump has his hands on the nuclear football. And so the way that Henry talks about this is that it's not just a game of politics or dunking on Donald Trump because he's old, because he is old. He's the oldest person to ever have taken the oath of office at his age. For Henry, it's that the consequences could be dire, and ignoring these things that are right in front of our faces could risk millions, if not tens of millions, of lives. It's Friday, May 15th, 2026. I'm Grant Hermes, and this is Make It Make Sense. Henry, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time. Mm-hmm. Let's start with let's start with the letter that got sent out. It's now part of Congressional Record. Did you know that was going to happen, for starters? Did you get reached out to by Senator Whitehouse?
No, actually, it was initiated by colleagues of mine. And taking the lead was John Pastore, who's a physician that I work with, and together we wrote the Constitution for the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, and that organization won the Nobel in 1985. So John and I were essentially like Rip Van Winkles for the next 40 years. We were absolutely asleep, and I was. I 10 years ago, one of our colleagues, Bandy Lee, anthologized the dangerous case of Donald Trump, and she was ahead of the time. She was ahead of the curve, and there weren't, to my mind, firm enough findings on the president's public mental status examination to warrant any strong psychiatric feelings that he was not up to the job. 10 years later, I get off the couch and I say, holy, what is going on here? And so I talked to some of my other Nobel buddies, and we compare notes, and we say, this is nuts. This is,
Mhm.
and worse than nuts. I mean, we have a lot of nutty presidents from time to time. That's not earth shattering, but nuclear war is earth shattering by definition.
Yeah.
And this guy administratively has access to the nuclear codes that no one else does. And were he to decide in a frenzy of tweeting in the middle of the night, damn it, I can solve the Iran problem in 30 seconds, which he could do, of course. It'd start a whole other collection of problems, but he could do that, and there's no real stopping him. Couple that to the personality and mental status changes that we all agreed we were seeing. The paranoia, the impulsivity, the rage, the irrationality, the illogic to his thinking, his thoughts, which seem at times delusional. Well, that's a bad combo if you're holding the nuclear button.
Right.
So I think it was that juxtaposition of a disturbed president with access to nuclear weapons, and now in a time of war.
Yeah.
And if we needed any convincing, we just had to listen to his threats to Iran to erase the civilization and end it with a single flash. And is he playing like Richard Nixon, the role of the faking the madman theory of government, or is he just a madman in government? And who could tell?
Right.
But more importantly, who wanted to take the chance?
Right.
And that, I think, is, if you can't tell, it's not a matter of a poker game. It's a matter of survival of literally tens of millions of people. And so it was that insight that galvanized John Pastore and Eric Shivian and Ira Helfand and Lisa Susterman and Bandy Lee and me to get together and say, look, what can we do about this thing? And so out of that came our medical statement. John Pastore is the son of the senator from Rhode Island, Pastore, and so he's a Rhode Island guy, and he reached out to Sheldon Whitehouse and Jack Reed and said, "Look, we need to do something about it." And they put their heads together, and that's what came out of the effort.
I think that's an interesting part of this letter is that you mentioned it a second ago, but that this is it's a medical letter. It's not a political one. This has very little to do with actually, in the entire letter itself, there's no mention of the president's actual policies other than the ones that seem the most erratic. And I think when we talk about this specific president's health, a lot of people get bogged down in the politics of this well, we can get into the specifics of the things that you're seeing in the president right now and why they're concerning, because I very much want to talk about that. But I think the first thing that people hear right now when they hear the president's health is declining in these things is that, well, where were these doctors with Joe Biden? And I think that there's a difference between
I think it's a great question.
Sure.
Can I answer that question?
Absolutely.
I think the people who are managing Joe Biden did a great job because they were holding up this scarecrow for months, and they couldn't do it during the debate. And when Biden came out and said to all the world, "Hey, I got dementia," the world said, "Holy shit!"
Yeah.
I was gobsmacked, and then I became enraged that the Democrats were trying to prop up this guy, really for their own own interests, own personal interests, and holding on to power. I wrote about this years ago on my Substack page called the power lust syndrome. If you go to Washington, you can catch this thing really fast. And what you really want to do is hold on to power as long as you can under any circumstances, regardless of the consequences. That's the power. And the Democrats had it just as much as the Republicans. They just did it in a different way. And so I was appalled by the Biden thing, as I think most of the country was. And so where were we? We were asleep. And actually we were fooled. I think the managers in the Oval Office fooled us until they couldn't anymore. Sure. And then chaos happened. In terms of Trump, we weren't watching Trump very much in the last, decade or so. During his presidency, where we were, and there were soft signs then in his presidency, but it wasn't, to me personally, and to my colleagues, it really wasn't a sea of, a bunch of red flags all over the place. But in the next 10 years, the data accrued, and I described this phenomenon where you're in line at the supermarket, and this guy comes up with a cart full of food, and he smashes into the woman in front of him and begins berating her for buying so much that it's slowing down the line. And he goes on and on and on. Well, most people would turn and say, something wrong with this guy. And yeah, right. And so as psychiatrists and neurologists, we could get to the point where the shopping cart was crashing into the people in front of him. And we could turn and say, there's something wrong with this guy. We're very good at diagnosing signs and symptoms. We don't have full access to make true diagnoses, but we can call a sign and a symptom what it is when we see it. And those signs and symptoms began to accrue in like a snowball in the last year or two. And so that's what we have.
Yeah. If Donald Trump wasn't the president, he was just a person that you saw that was exhibiting these symptoms that you mentioned in this letter. And I want to kind of go through some of these quick because I wrote them down.
Sure.
So you've got deterioration in cognitive function, sleeping in public, rage, grandiose delusions, impaired judgment and impulse control, a tendency to stick in the same actions and an inability to let go or move on, manic late night posting communications. If you saw this in just an average person, what would you think immediately? Like, this person needs to seek professional help.
I spent teaching at Harvard for 25 years, so I would see this guy in the acute psychiatric service, and the first thing I would say is, bring on the medical students.
What a cocktail.
This guy was exhibiting, multi-dimensional problems and having them sorted out and intellectually put together hypotheses of what was going on. Great teaching case.
But now he's the president, so that feels.
Well, now it's a little different. He's still a teaching case. He's a great teaching case. The problem is that he also has enormous and very dangerous power. And so, I like complicated cases, but I don't like them when they're in the president.
Yeah. I want to ask you about one of the specific sentences, and then you said that given this whole complicated case that the president is now, that he is a clear and present danger to the country and to the world. Right. And that it would for you to not bring that up would defy your Declaration of Geneva.
Okay.
Am I right in saying that, or am I?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think I wrote a piece a week or two ago about the so-called Goldwater Rule, and it was about the Tatiana Tarasov, Barry Goldwater and Donald Trump. And Tatiana Tarasov was a young woman who was murdered by a psychiatric patient because her caregivers failed to alert her that she was in danger. And so out of that came a classic a piece of case law, the duty to warn.
Mm-hmm.
So psychiatrists and other physicians had a duty to warn. And then Barry Goldwater came along, and he was maligned by a small percentage of psychiatrists with diagnoses that he didn't have. And let the record show that I lived in Arizona, and Barry Goldwater was my senator, and he was sane, and he was a good senator. I like Barry Goldwater. So talking about nonpartisan stuff, I like Goldwater, and I was a little suspicious of Johnson. So that being said, the American Psychiatric Association was horribly embarrassed because psychiatrists came out and they diagnosed this guy. They didn't even talk to him. They had no data to support their assertions, and they should be ashamed. And psychiatrists should never again make any kind of diagnosis for people that they A, didn't examine, and B, didn't have permission to go public with. So that was the Goldwater Rule.
Right.
The net effect of the Goldwater Rule for the next 40 years or so was essentially a gag order. Psychiatrists couldn't talk about anything. They were under the shadow of the American Psychiatric Association, and it was a terribly unfortunate thing. And so those of us who thought about this for a while realized that, look, the Goldwater Rule, first of all, is not a rule. It's not a law. It's a principle. It's a good principle. It protects confidentiality and the rights of patients to open up with a person in a private setting and do some work. It's great. It's a good rule, but it's not a rule. It's a principle. And principles, in fact, sometimes conflict with one another. And the principle of protecting the privacy of a single person has to be weighed against the principle of speaking out in favor of the public good, of public health, of the survival of 93 million Iranians who are under a nuclear threat.
Right.
And so when you balance one principle against the other, sometimes one principle has to yield to the other. And this was the reasoning that permitted us to go forward. So,
is there a specific symptom of the president's that troubles you the most? Is it the late night posts? Is it the disorganized speech? Is it the impulse control? For you, what was your, I guess maybe either entry point or breaking line? Pick your metaphor for which symptom for you.
I think it, well, there's a bunch.
It is quite the buffet. Yeah.
It is a buffet. I mean, like I say, it's grandiosity, it's poor impulse control, it's paranoia, it's it's poor judgment, it's a manic-like mood at night that permits him to feel like he can do anything. He says that I can do anything I want. It's all of those things together. There's a great quote from the Prussian general von Moltke in the First World War. And he said, "Well, what are your favorite kinds of officers?" And he said, "Well, I have intelligent officers and stupid officers. I have officers who are lazy, and I have officers who are energetic. I have use for 3 of the 4. I have no use for the energetic but stupid." And I think that captures the danger of having this disturbed individual who is filled with energy in the middle of the night, and he he has no judgment.
Today's episode is brought to you by Ground News, which is something that I wish was around when I first started getting interested in and covering politics. I know it seems like common sense now, but it's really hard to sift through all the news that is out there because the same story can be completely different depending on who and where you're reading it from. That's where Ground News comes in. They give you all the versions of the story right in your feed, left, right, and center. They show you those side by side so you can see how the framing changes and you get a full view of the story. They also have a blind spot feed that flags stories that are being ignored by one side of the aisle entirely. In a media landscape built to keep you in an echo chamber, Ground News shows you the way out. And right now you can use the link in the description for 40% off. It is their best deal on their best plan. That's the Vantage plan right now. You can only get it from Make It Make Sense. Get access to their blind spot feed, more than 50,000 unique outlets for news, and one of my favorite features is their Burst Your Bubble newsletter, which helps you break out of that echo chamber and shows you your own media bias for all the things that you consume. I think it is an invaluable resource to expose you to different ideas and help keep your own media diet healthy, because a healthy media diet is just as important as a regular diet. Again, use the exclusive code in the description to get 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan, their absolute best plan right now.
Earlier you called this a movement of doctors and your colleagues that are pushing for this. Why isn't this movement bigger, do you think? Why aren't more medical professionals coming out and saying things? Why do you think the press, myself included, it's taken me this long to get you on the phone here, right? To get you on video here. What do you think is the reason that this movement isn't bigger and more forceful?
Well, first of all, my answer is that it's only 2 weeks old.
Sure.
I mean that literally. On April 30th, the Congressional Record published our medical concern statement. And within a week, the press began waking up and saying, "Hey, Dr. Abraham, can you come forward and talk about this stuff?" Mm-hmm. And so I said, "Grant, I'm signing you up." So it's only a week or two old. Secondly, I don't really see it as a movement. That's a grandiose term. When we started Physicians for Social Responsibility and parlayed that into the International Physicians Group to prevent nuclear war, that took a number of years. And that was a movement. We created an international movement in 40 countries, and we had millions of people in the streets, and we had architects for social responsibility. I mean, we created. It was a big deal. We're not a big deal now. We're 36. Relatively medically trained and sophisticated, mental health experts, and that's it. Is that a movement? That's sort of expensive. That's a lawn party, right? So it's we're not at any movement stage, but what we are at the point of doing is ringing the alarm as loud as we can, as far and as wide as we can. Just this week, the British Medical Journal picked up an article and wrote a terrific piece. Your buddies at the Daily Beast are going to be talking to me in 2 hours. So we're just beginning to light the flame. Whether it catches, I don't know. I think it will. When we first came out with this medical statement, I sent it out to my relatively modest Substack crowd. And I did it as a note. I'm not sure what a note is, but it goes out to a lot of people. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
It really, the notes really move. And I got within a day or so over 100 positive responses.
Yeah.
Dr. Abraham, thank God you're coming forward. We're having, like you just said, what took you so long? We really need you. It was okay. And I got 2 negative ones. And I always respond to the negative ones because no person is completely wrong. As a psychiatrist, I teach and I have believed for many years that everyone tells the truth Everyone tells the truth. Even the most dishonest, disgusting, slide under the door drug addicts who are going to steal your medicine while you sleep. They're telling you the truth. That's who they are. That's the
Right.
truth. The
Right.
lying is the truth. And so when someone comes to me and they're negative and they're hostile, whatever, and I said, well, look, my friend, that's the first thing I say. I said, honest people can differ. I understand the value of your some of the things you're saying. A perfect case in point. The other day, Trump was at a meeting in the Oval Office. They were talking about child care. Trump and child care? Are you kidding me? Well, they're out of their minds. And Trump, and of course, Trump was falling asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like this, and the AP, whoever was there, Reuters or something, took his picture, and they said, when they published the picture, it says, President Trump attends a meeting of child care workers from around the country. That's all they said. They didn't say he was sleeping on the switch or anything like that. They didn't editorialize. They just showed,
Yeah.
in medicine, if someone's dead and you make rounds in the morning and they're dead, and they give you the O sign.
Yeah.
And if it's like this,
Yeah.
that's the Q sign. well, he was one step away from the O sign, and so it was obvious he was sleeping. And someone commented on it on Facebook or one of those things, and immediately out of the Truth Social crowd came, he's not sleeping, he's just blinking, you moron.
Yeah, that was directly from the White House. That was their rapid response.
Yes,
they
have a rapid response team for this
Yes.
stuff. That's exactly right. And one of my heroes, Heather Delaney Reese, just a phenomenal person, and she analyzed it quite well. And she said, "Look, the hallmark of the authoritarian mind is to get you to deny what you are seeing and deny what you're hearing." And you're watching the president, and he's sleeping, and someone says, "You moron, he's just blinking." Well, I mean, you gotta really time your camera to. You're like, "That's a blink." Yeah, it's hard
Right.
to catch. It's hard to catch a blink. So and that's a perfect example of the authoritarian structure that we have to push against. So we have to learn to stick by our guns. Call it as we see it. As clinicians, that's the important thing. If someone has tangential speech, he can't go from A to B to C back to A in an orderly way. He starts off talking about Jerome Powell, and then within a second is talking about his shark beat. And he does that again and again and again. We call that tangential thinking. It's not normal. It's it could, there may be many causes to tangential. He could be drunk. He could be absolutely exhausted because he just flew in from Asia. I mean, there are many relatively benign explanations. But if he does it every day, then there's something going on that we need to pay attention to and at least flag that he's thinking tangentially.
Right.
Now, the tangential thinking is one of the signs. There's a whole bunch. And so that's what motivated us. I say, hey, look, do you hear a 1 alarm fire? Yeah. Do you hear a 2 alarm? Wow, that's a 2. 3 alarm. 8 alarm. Whoa.
We've run out of alarms.
We've run. That's right. We've run out of alarms. That's a great quote.
What is your take on the candor coming out of the White House medical team right now? The president is now going back in for another annual physical, which would, I think, technically be his third annual physical within a calendar year. and then another what seems to be like semi-emergency dental procedure, quote unquote. It absolutely could be, right. He could have a cracked
Well,
tooth and abscess. Like, well,
we can speculate,
yeah, I don't want to speculate on that.
and you know, and speculation can take you anywhere if you
Right,
think about
right.
it. And my colleagues and I prefer to stick with the data.
Mhm.
He's tangential. He's paranoid. He's impulsive. You know, he's confused. Yeah, he calls Greenland Iceland, you know,
Right.
7 times in Davos. I mean, come on, this is not a
Right.
good picture here.
Right.
Can I make some inferences about his medical care and his, you know, physical in the last 3 times in the last year? Yeah, I can. Have you had a physical 3 times in the last year?
Yeah.
No,
No.
neither have I. And I'm sick as hell. I have a doctor. I have a doctor for every part of my body. You know. Madeline Kahn says it well in Blazing Saddles. She says, everything below the waist is kaput.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I know what it is to be sick, but so what? I don't go every 10 minutes.
Right.
And the other take-home lesson is that, and it's a very interesting lesson, is that he had a Montreal test for cognitive function.
Yes.
In 2018, and he's had 2 others since then. Now, you generally give a MoCA, that's what it's called. You give just as a crude screen for mild cognitive disorder, and but if you do serial MoCAs, you're following a number.
Right.
You're tracking a number, and they're not telling what the numbers are, which is, I think, a major problem for us.
He does keep saying the end of that test is very difficult. It starts easy and gets very hard. And I've looked at the examples of that, and the end of the test is like date, place, time kind of question.
No, he's very good at the squirrel. He does the squirrel well, but after the squirrel, we don't know.
Right.
No, it's interesting. I worked with the inventor of the mini mental status exam, and he was my mentor for a while, and he was a wonderful man, and it's very similar to the MoCA.
Yeah.
And several points should be taken. First of all, if you take the same test more than once, there's a learning curve, so your score is biased upward.
Right.
But if they keep repeating the test, then it's not upward enough. And that's something that they want to keep an eye on. The other issue is that there are medical concerns that we don't have to take an elaborate history for. He's bleeding into his hands. And he said, well, that's because he shakes hands all day. Well, he doesn't shake hands with his left hand. I mean, come on, guys, give us a better excuse. The better excuse is probably, and again, I don't know, either he has a blood disorder, or he has he's on anticoagulants, and they're struggling to get the right dose, because too much is not good and too little is not good also.
Right. So, and we just saw in the last round after he came back from his dental visit in Florida, which was an odd thing in itself, but we don't have to speculate about that just because the White House has its own suite of these things.
Yeah.
But now this bruising is on both of his hands.
Yes.
And swelling and the makeup is on both of his hands, which is now new. We had not seen that before. I think what I was really asking earlier was, do you think, just as you thought you had a duty to warn here, does somebody within the White House medical staff at this point have a duty to come forward and say, hey?
Absolutely. Dr. Barbara Bella is his primary care doctor in the White House, and I have no reason to question his competence and honesty in his work. He may be adhering to the Goldwater principle to not reveal things, and also it's kind of a political bombshell for him to come forward and say, "Oh, the patient has had a small stroke in the left hemicortex, and we took a secret MRI of the brain, and there are holes all over the place." And he's not going to say that.
Right.
And if he were to say it, it would be a political, explosion of the most dramatic kind. Allow me to stick to the medical stuff.
Yeah.
People say, well, how can we get rid of this guy? I say, well, first of all, I think he should step down, and how we do it, is probably above my pay grade. But impeachment certainly comes to mind. I mean, if the Democrats win the House, then they can start impeachment proceedings if they choose to. And why would they impeach President Trump? I think that's a good question. And my answer is there are possible three sets of grounds. There's the medical grounds. He's just not competent to do this stuff, and this is where we're coming from. That's all we're coming from. The other two grounds are policy. He shouldn't have gone to war in Iran. He shouldn't be blowing up fishermen in the Caribbean. I mean, there are policy kinds of things that we can get angry about and maybe impeach him for. That's not my department. And the third area that's not my department is moral turpitude. He clearly has assaulted women. He's been fined and tried and publicly identified as an assaulter of women. There's a list. Probably the Epstein files have very terrible things in them as well.
Right.
There's a list. And the cheating and the lying and the business swindles and the grift that's in the White House that has never been there before, not this way. That's moral turpitude. That's crime. I'm not a prosecutor. I'll be interested to know how the evidence gets played out, and if it moves in that direction, fine. But of those three sources of vulnerability that the president has, I think the greatest is his medical impairments, and secondarily, what that means to the safety of millions of other people, including us.
Yeah.
So,
my last thing here, Henry, is Representative Jamie Raskin has put forward a bill that would create a congressional body, independent body full of medical staff, psychiatric staff, specifically psychiatric staff, actually, that would assess the president, any president going forward, when they were asked for 25th Amendment considerations. I've written about this pretty extensively, but the authors of the 25th Amendment came back 20 years later and were like, hey, this is the exact thing we think should be done. We think the vice president should be removed from this consideration, so should the cabinet, and Congress should step in here. If that comes about, it's a long shot, but if it comes about, is that a thing that you would be on board with? Would you serve on something like that?
Oh, well, sign me up. No, let me say that I try to be as neutral and as objective in my findings as possible. I try to verify everything that I say, particularly in a clinical sense. And I would try to be as neutral as possible in a setting like that. There's no question about it. For example, in a piece I wrote about Trump sleeping in front of cameras, I said, well, he could have a sleep disorder. He could be taking stimulant drugs all night and crashing during the day. I mean, they're medical. There's a difference with diagnosis that we should consider. Or he just may be tired. He may, being a president is a hard job. Yes. He may have just gotten off of an airplane from Europe and he's jet lagged and he's falling into his, soup. I mean, in fact, we had, George Bush fall into his soup. So we didn't, drag out the 25th Amendment for that. So that being said, we don't have all the answers, but we do have the signs and symptoms, and that's what we have to work with.
Doctor, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I want to thank Henry for coming on the show. You can find a link to the entire open letter in the description for this episode. You can also find a link to my brand new piece from the Make It Make Sense Substack, where I lean in on some more research that Henry and his colleagues did about a timeline of when the president's symptoms that they're watching really kicked in. And unfortunately, it is just in the last 10 years, which is incidentally when he's also been president twice. But if you want access to that, you can get that for just $5 a month as a paid subscriber. And because I mentioned the Substack, that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. Like, subscribe, leave a comment below with your thoughts on the president's health right now. And as always, share the show on social media. It is Mims News Pod. That is all one word on every platform. You can find me at Grant Hermes on Twitter and Blue Sky and at Grant_Hermes on everything else. Thank you so much for watching today. I'm Grant Hermes, and I'll talk to you next time.